All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Watershed Congress. Today is Wednesday, September 23rd. This is day 3 of our virtual Watershed Congress week, and we're so happy to have you here. The Watershed Congress is organized by the Delaware River Network in collaboration with many other organizations. And my name is Seraiah. I'm a volunteer member of the Watershed Congress Organizing Committee. I'm also currently a geology student at Temple University and a teacher at Schuylkill Center in Roxborough. And I'll also be your moderator for this session, which is starting a business, starting a nonprofit. We are so happy to present our speakers with you for this session. So we're going to start with announcing names and everyone can give a brief bio of themselves. So we have Sarah Lowe. We have Jim MacKenzie. We have Al Renzi and Tarsha Scovens. So Sarah, if you would like to give us a brief bio.
Sure. I'm Sarah Lowe. I started and I'm one of the team members of the Tacoma Tree Foundation. I started the organization just 2 years ago now, and I have kind of a history of entrepreneurship. I started my own business years ago, Strategic Nature LLC, and actually in high school I started, I think I was like 13, I started Little Puppet People. So I've tried this out a few times of like starting things, and but prior I've also been in government and other consulting firms.
Awesome, thank you. Jim, would you like to share your bio with us?
Yeah, my name's Jim MacKenzie. I have a degree in landscape architecture from Penn State back in the mid-'80s. Co-owner of Octoraro Native Plant Nursery. We're celebrating 30 years of business this year. And part-time, I also am a mental health and psychiatric nurse.
Oh, that's awesome. Al, would you like to share with us?
Sure. My name is Al Renzi from Yellow Springs Farm. My background is actually I had a corporate life before my farm life, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for many years. And then 20 years ago, my wife, Catherine, and I started Yellow Springs Farm. And we initially started out as a native plant nursery, and we bought 2 goats, and from there we ended up with a cheese making business. So for the last 20 years, we sort of combined a native plant nursery with the artisanal goat cheese, and it's sort of native connecting landscapes and foodscapes kind of concept. So it's been a fun ride.
Awesome, thank you. Tarsha?
Hi everyone, I'm Tarsha Scovens, and I am co-founder with my twin sister, Keisha Scovens, and we have a business called Let's Go Outdoors that has been operating for about 10 years, but actively with programs and experiences and education for about 8 years now in the Philadelphia area. So we're really doing a lot of programs in the outdoors with young children to adults. And then also we started a very small kind of nonprofit venture called Urban Outdoor Initiatives, which is kind of one of those things that we fell into in a way. And we might talk a little bit about that as we go through the program today. So excited to be here and share what I know with all of you.
Awesome, thank you so much. I encourage everyone in the audience, if you want to add in the chat where you're coming from and kind of what your background is, what kind of work, so we get a feel for who's out there. So I guess we'll start with our first question. What inspired you to start a business nonprofit? How did you know it was the right time? So if Sarah, you would like to kick us off with that question.
Sure, thank you. So I started Tacoma Tree Foundation about 2 years ago, and I probably should have mentioned I'm a tree person, sort of like all around. That's sort of the the consistent thing across my career. And so before starting the nonprofit organization, I worked for the city of Tacoma, and it's not my first time working in trees in the city government. Oops, excuse me, thanks. Hazardous chairs here. Anyway, so basically I was working in city government, in a government very different than the one I had been accustomed to in Philadelphia. And, you know, every government's got its own things that are a little different. And I saw this opportunity and gap, really, that community members weren't able to access the kind of support that I had seen in other communities. And I think it coincided with my really wanting and seeing in myself that I enjoy most working with community members, trying to figure things out together. And that's really how it came about. I was sort of feeling restless in terms of wanting to show up in a certain way and contribute in a certain way with community members, like really on the ground, planting trees, helping people plant trees, solving other problems, you know, being able to say, not having to say like, you need to call this other person, that person's going to deal with it, but we'll work on it together. And because there was no organization like that, and actually we're the first tree-focused nonprofit organization in the state of Washington, is what I understand. Someone might challenge me on that, but that's what I heard from a reputable source. So there's really a need, at least I saw a need for an organization that could kind of bring neighborhood voices together, amplify voices. There's a certain thing I think that happens when you have, actually I've seen it, there's an organization can sometimes show up in a way that is harder for individual voices to show up. So even if 20 people say the same problem across different neighborhoods, an organization can show up, one of those individuals can show up as part of an organization, and it's heard differently, which speaks to a lot of other stuff that's worth talking about, but maybe outside of this particular presentation. But I felt like I had some skills that could help build something. And maybe I'll leave it at that so other people can speak too.
Awesome, thank you so much. Tarsha, would you like to also share, you know, what inspired you to start your business?
Sure. So starting Let's Go Outdoors. So with everybody, I'm sure you probably, if you're in this session, maybe you're thinking of entrepreneurship and you see Shark Tank and it's like, oh my goodness, why didn't I think of that? Well, that wasn't us. So if it could have been, that would be awesome. But the biggest thing is it was started with just a passion. So it started with wanting to see more people of color, because I knew that I'm a person of color, you know, identify as an African-American Black woman. And I wanted to see more individuals that look like me in outdoor spaces, and not growing up doing outdoor recreation as with many people of all races. It's like, wow, how can I start to get other people to join me in doing this, you know? And in my adult life, I should say. And my sister, Keisha, she was like, yeah. And we had traveled across country together and came back, and we understood like, wow, there's such a beauty in nature, and why wouldn't we expose to this? So we wanted to really bring something like that back into neighborhoods, city communities, people of color. So that's kind of where it all started, I should say, with that just passion and interest in just wanting to see more people that look like me in the outdoors. And going from there, it just spiraled into, oh, wow, you know, talking to people in neighborhood and doing different festivals and fairs, and just seeing that there are more people of color out there that want to do this, and then launching that into another piece and moving it forward. But the vision just started with a passion. And that was for our Let's Go Outdoors piece. And I'll tell you, as far as the nonprofit piece, which we started only about 4 years ago, that really was because we were out in the communities, and you start to see that, you know, there's low income, high poverty neighborhoods that can't afford just to say, oh yeah, I want to join you on that camping trip or that fishing trip. So we really said, how can we reach that community in a way? And that started us on a nonprofit venture, if you will, and went from there. So that's a little bit of how we got started and what started that interest.
Awesome. I'm seeing a trend here that's super cool. Al, would you like to give us a little story of your inspiration for starting your business?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. Well, I guess the key point for us was 9/11 back in 2001. And we were both in corporate jobs at the time, doing a lot of travel. And then we were recently married. We bought this old farmhouse that we're now living on for the last 20 years. And after 9/11 happened, I remember getting on a plane about two or 3 weeks after they allowed air travel again, and there was nobody on the plane. It was an international flight. I was going to London. There was nobody in the Philadelphia airport. There was nobody in London. And it was a very scary situation. And I think when I got back, we realized that this was not the kind of life we wanted to have. And we had this wonderful farm, which was a part of the original William Penn land grant. And it's small in terms of acreage, but back in the day, which was 200 years ago, it used to be a dairy farm. And it's too small to have cows at this point. So we were thinking, what can we do to respect the heritage and of the dairy industry that was here at the time? And we looked into it, and the regulatory bar was a little too high for us. But we also had a strong interest in native plants because we had put a conservation easement on our property, and part of the assessment for that is to do a botanical survey, and that really intrigued us. And it was easier to do that than the dairy thing. So we both kept our jobs and just started a nursery. And we actually had Jim MacKenzie's help, who's on the panel with us today. So he sort of mentored us initially, and that was a big help. And it kind of evolved from there. In 2005, we both transitioned out, focused more on land preservation and conservation. And in I guess 2009, we got our dairy license. We were making cheese. And the reason why we did that is because it was really important to have diversified revenue streams. Plants are seasonal, and the banks still want you to pay the mortgages in January, February, March when you're not growing anything. So it was a way for us to diversify. But I think ultimately the inspiration was to do something together. We were newlyweds. 9/11 was very traumatic, and we realized that our home was here, and we thought we wanted to do something together and realize something together.
That's really awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Jim, can we?
Yeah, I guess to the point actually though, in fact, I actually bought into this company. So we've been in business 30 years, but I only joined it 2.5, 3 years into it. So it was actually my partner and still my partner's original brainchild. And it was a spin-off of an environmental consulting firm. He saw the need back then for plant material and pursued that with, basically the one company supporting the nursery. So, but for me, coming out of school, landscape architecture in the mid 80s and working in Philadelphia, there was, the big boom, commercial, residential in the whole 5-county area. And I think our firm was responsible for paving most of Bucks County. So it was kind of left me a little disillusioned, and I left the profession. And I knew I always, for landscape architecture, was more the stewardship and the environmental stuff that drove me. So I just stayed in contact with my partner, and he approached me, actually his wife approached me, and we made it happen. So, but it was the right thing for both of us. And I think that was the biggest thing. When you're in a partnership, you have to have a real concrete understanding of each other's strengths, what each person brings to the table. It needs to be discussed at length in advance. I've seen plenty of partnerships and entities fail because of the lack of planning. And that's the other part of that question is that I wanted to kind of address was, do you have a business plan? And I am a planner by nature. To me, without one, you're already 80% destined to fail. I feel very strongly that business planning is an essential tool because it forces the individual to look at every single aspect of what it is they want to do. To Tarsha's point, passion is a driver for a lot of people, and it is for the green industry. A lot of people like plants, so they go, hey, I'll start a nursery, I'll do this. But you know, a very poor history of business experience in this segment of the industry. And I think that you need to know your strengths. You need to be able to look hard at yourself and identify where you are comfortable, and more importantly, where you're not, because that is what will trip you up. So business planning is huge. It can be expensive when you talk to consultants. So I always recommend people check out SCORE, score.org. It's basically senior retired executives that volunteer their own services, low cost to no cost, extremely good information, great webinars, all kinds of stuff. It's evolved quite a bit over time. It's still a very pertinent thing, especially for new time, you know, people wanting to consider starting their own operation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So that kind of brings us to our next question of a business plan, and how did you decide you were going to be for-profit versus nonprofit? So a lot to consider there. Seraiah, would you like to start with that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to stay brief, because there is so much to talk about when it comes to for-profit versus nonprofit. For me, when it came to doing a nonprofit versus my experience starting a business, it was really and is important to me that the nonprofit is something that is about a bigger mission, a bigger goal than anything I can achieve on my own, or also anything that, you know, that to be successful, somebody else can take over next year or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and that its role in this environment in this city is sustainable because there's some momentum around it that's built up from community, and that there are other people who want to kind of take the lead or share the lead. And with a business, at least in my experience with the business, it was really about like, how can I work in a way that I want to work in the kinds of projects I want to do. It was more about me as an individual versus what I can accomplish with others in a collective that has maybe eventually has nothing to do with me. You know, right now I kind of serve a purpose in starting the organization, and in doing some of the very tricky stuff of finances. I mean, like Jim was mentioning, there's the real realities of, I spend a lot of time doing accountability, basically keeping us financially accountable and solvent, which is not like the fun part of it. And so I think that's probably a big thing, is like having a mission that is bigger than me, and where there's a real need in the community. In our case, in the community, maybe that's the scale we're kind of working in this city, and a little bit to some extent regionally. But I think that's probably another part of it, is like, what's the scale you want to work, and how does the container, so to speak, that you're creating work in that scale. So for instance, with us, you know, like we're not going to start probably doing work in Oregon, for instance, but we are very much focused on this place, and that's kind of the point, is the place, and not you know, yeah, I can kind of step away from it at any point, assuming it's sustainable financially and fiscal, yeah, in every other respect.
So you saw to fulfill your passion and what you wanted to do was easier through the nonprofit route than the for-profit route?
Not necessarily. I think, I mean, as a for-profit business, I think you can be very mission driven and be fulfilling a mission that way. In the case of our nonprofit, it's really that we're educating, empowering, and supporting community members in neighborhood-based greening. And that's not going to change if, like, next year I decide that I'm more interested in, you know, building swimming pools or something. You know, like, the mission's not going to adjust with my interests. It's really about what's the community's need, and how can the organization best fill that need, and who can be a part of that organization in a way that helps us work in ways that are in line with the sort of group values. So if next year I decide that I really, that my priorities are totally different, then that doesn't change the organization, but it might change my role with the organization. Whereas if it was my own business, I might shift what the business is doing based on how my priorities have shifted or how my interests have shifted, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. That's really good. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Tarsha, could you please answer for us also, why you decided nonprofit versus for-profit with your business?
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you, basically, at that point in time, when we started, it was all about, just this passion and this want and this drive to actually engage people. So our thought was, what's the cheapest way we can start to a business? And that's basically what it boiled down to. It's cheaper to start a for-profit business than it is a nonprofit. But however, I will tell you, in the long run, it is, if you're thinking about finances or how you want to build out and things like that, I would say it's more expensive to run a for-profit business now that we understand a lot of the intricacies. And when we started, we did not have a business plan. We really just said, we want to just get people outdoors and we want to throw a trip. And so here, how do we collect money? And so we didn't come to this from a business standpoint. It was really passion. And then finally, after a year of doing what we were doing, because we were self-funding ourselves in the beginning, we learned, okay, we need to write a business plan. So then we went to Women's Business Development Center. They are really good. They have a fast track new venture program, which was very helpful and helped us to start to understand what has to go into planning a business. So that helped us out by all means. And again, it really came down to finances for us in the beginning. Now that we understand for-profit, nonprofit, I think as Sarah's mentioning, there's a lot of things to really consider. Your mission driven, how you're connecting in communities, really thinking about, how you're leading and going from there. So a lot of pieces, but at the same time, I guess the bottom line, it was finances for us that kind of determined where we were going to go for our setup. I also wanted to say there was another question that came in on the Q&A. I don't know if it says, how did you differentiate your nonprofit or business from others when you all first started? So that just had come in. And it says, okay, how did you differentiate your nonprofit or business from others when you all first started? Well, we really didn't have, I guess, there wasn't a clear plan. It was more, we really wanted to reach people of color. So I think that was different in the beginning because, again, that was about 10 years ago. I think there's just been so much momentum in the diverse space, if you will, that there's a lot more going on now. But 10 years ago, it wasn't a lot. And that's kind of what I think helped us to differentiate ourselves, just not on purpose, but just because of what we were doing.
Right. So Jim, did you want to answer also how you differentiate your business? I believe your business is a for-profit as well.
Yeah, that's correct. To be honest with you, I don't think we even entertained, like I said, I bought in. So I bought into a for-profit business, but Nursery is part of agriculture for all regulatory IRS purposes and stuff like that. I'm not saying that there aren't any nonprofit nurseries. There are a few, but it was just, that's just the model we went for and stuck with. But so I think the thing that I notice more than anything right now is especially sort of with the whole, I'll just say millennials and social justice, environmental justice. There is a very different landscape out there. You see a lot more nonprofits as a business model. To me, it's just a business model. It's a different business model. There's pros and cons. There's financials. There's legal. There's tax implications to all these things. That's part of the planning to figure it out. To Sarah's point, mission is important and so is continuity, but you can get that in either a nonprofit or a for-profit segment. our mission from the get-go was, we don't want to plant plants. We want to create a forest. You know, planting plants is actually easy. Getting it to a forest involves a lot of other things. So that, you know, that was almost a driving factor for us, more than just like profitability. It's like we saw very poor success rates. It was just it was a bad way to attain a goal. You get plenty of photo ops, but you don't get a forest, and that's what we really need. So that was as much of driving factor in our mission, and it still is to this day. So you can achieve both, nonprofit or otherwise, not for profit. I just see there's a lot more nonprofit activity going on than there is. Well, there's both, but more nonprofit than previously.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely noticed that. So keeping with you, Jim, did you have any mentors, you know, when you first bought into your business? Did you have any before that, or pick up any that kind of helped you along the way?
Seraiah, if it's okay with you, can we let Al answer the whole profit nonprofit thing first, just to be on that, and I'm happy to answer that next question. I don't think Al has a chance to answer.
As far as the profit nonprofit, I mean, we had always intended to be a for-profit business. There was never any thought about that aspect of what we were doing. When we put together the business plan, we went through a considerable business planning process. We did a lot of research. We traveled to different areas, and I think that we wanted to see if small-scale farming could be profitable. I mean, that was our goal. I mean, farming in general is not always a profitable venture. A lot of dairy farms have historically gone out of business, and I think in recent years it's actually gotten worse. Farmers do not get paid. The dairy farmers do not get paid to produce milk, a raw product like that. And what we learned over time, you have to add value. Whether it's on the plant side or whether it's on the dairy side. So from the beginning, we wanted to demonstrate that we could do this, because there was a lot of skepticism about, you know, small farms keep going out of business. Why do you think you can make this work? And we thought we could make it work because we had a background in business. We were entrepreneurial. We were really interested in what we were doing here and wanting to make a small farm operation work in a community. You know, we were not thinking about scaling it up and going national. We wanted to be community-based and connect with people and have that personal relationship with our customer, whether it's on the, you know, helping with conservation landscaping, or whether it's providing food. I mean, cheese is food, and food is very personal. And so we wanted to have that connection. So it was never a discussion with us, nonprofit versus profit, because we really had a goal to, you know, create a model, a business model where small scale farming could be successful. And we wanted to demonstrate that to younger people so that they can come in and do what that I think we accomplished.
Awesome, thank you. So I'll actually direct the next question to both Jim and Al, because if I recall, Al, you said that Jim helped you mentoring a little bit in the native plant side. So we could start with Jim or Al, which either of you want to talk just about that process of mentorship.
Go ahead, Al.
So on the native plant side, you know, Jim was really sort of a focal point for us, given his history in the industry and his background. And he was, I think he may have been the first person we sought out. And he was very, very helpful, but also very realistic. And I remember him bringing up the business planning aspect of things and really, you know, setting goals in terms of what we wanted to accomplish. And I think that we knew we were not going to be a large-scale operation, really didn't want that. And it sort of came back to the community and making a difference in our community. So our focus has always been sort of the retail customer, small projects, rain gardens, meadows, restoration, riparian buffer type situations, things that we can handle as a small group of people. But I think Jim and a few other folks were really sort of important in terms of sort of keeping us focused and getting us down a path that was the right path. On the cheese side of things, we were fortunate to travel to different areas of the U.S. and in Italy. I'll just relay one story. We met with one cheesemaker. His name was Mario Galla, and the Italians are great. They really don't want to talk about business or how to make cheese. They want to just talk about what's going on in life, and they want to know about politics and how we're living our life here back in America. And we got through like 2 or 3 hours of lunches, and we were interested in this one cheese, and the cheese was Robbiolo at the time, I remember. And so he finally started talking about how to make this cheese. And Catherine, my wife, speaks Italian, so I don't speak very good Italian. So she was translating what he was saying, and I was writing everything down. And at the end, he said to us, and I think this was really how we came to develop our philosophy about the plants and the cheese. He said, I'm happy to give you this recipe. He said, but you're never going to be able to go home and reproduce what I'm doing here, because you don't have our land, you don't have our animals, you don't have our terroir and what we're feeding our animals. And he looked at us and he said, why don't you just go home and make your own cheese? And that was the best cheese lesson I ever got. And we actually took that lesson home and sort of brought it out in all of our business, sort of thinking, try to make it your own, try to do something that's creative and represents your place and not something that somebody else has done. And I think we learned a lot from Mario Galla. And so I would say that we were fortunate to have mentors. You always end up standing on other people's shoulders to move forward. And we were fortunate to have that. Jim?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think whether there's mentors, there's consultants, and there's contacts. They can all be one and the same. And I would say I've relied on all of them. Early on, it was my partner because he had business experience. But we reached out to a lot of people through professional organizations. For us, Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association, but plenty of other environmental organizations. We got engaged. You just have to put yourself in those positions. We also, because we are connected with many government-funded activities for whether it's clean air, clean water, all those sort of stuff. We engage and follow closely the political climates, Harrisburg, federal, all that sort of stuff. And so it's important. So there may not be a mentor in that, but there's importance in following the things that affect your business. And then just contacts. I look at it as if you're starting your own business, then you should, leave no stone unturned that can help you with that formulation. So I do believe it's important to seek those out. There's many different avenues that you can do it. And that can even include friendly competition. For us, there's a lot of really friendly people in this industry. It's not cutthroat. Well, maybe it is. But in any event, there's a lot of information sharing within our industry in general. And so it's nice when you have that. It can be anything from formal to, informal gatherings and things like that. So basically, I'm just encouraging you to explore anything that's open to you. And, there's so much online these days, it's not even funny. You don't even have to do it all in person.
Right. So this kind of moves us to our next question about how you adapt in difficult times. So have you seen any, well, we're in a pandemic now, but, has anyone seen anything in their business that has, allowed for an opportunity of growth per se, or some adaptation, some ways you've changed in this difficult time or previous difficult times. So Sarah, would you?
Yeah, sure. Well, kind of tying also into the last question too, I read something, or I listened to something yesterday where somebody said to trust your network. And in other words, in the context, it was, really lean on people and let them know that, things are not easy when they're not easy, or that you need help when you need help. And when I started my business, like a really long time ago now, I talked to Jim about it. And he said, I don't know if you remember this, but he said something like, talk to other people, like look for mentors, look for people who can support you. And before that moment, I thought, I'm a small business. I'm supposed to like go out there and compete and like, prove myself and do it all by myself. And it was just, it was kind of not the way to go. I've gained so much from having that practice of asking people for help, and or not just even help, but just feedback, advice, perspective. And I think right now I'm pulling on that now too, because as we're an in-person organization, or sort of like founded on the idea that people need contact with each other more often, and now we can't do that. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest, but it is pushing us to do things like make videos, and the benefit of doing things like going digital with some things that we do is that we can reach people that we couldn't reach before, because for all numbers of reasons, lots of reasons. And while I can't wait till we can do in-person stuff and like really be in community with each other, that I don't ever want to stop doing the video part too, because I feel like it just expands the access that we can provide. It just creates more opportunity for access, and that's a really important part of our organization. And so I think that's a big thing. It requires a lot of learning and stretching in uncomfortable ways. And I think being in a small nonprofit, we have about 10 people, everybody's part-time. We don't have a lot of wiggle room. So learning new things stretches us in all sorts of ways, really. It's a small nonprofit like ours, we're already kind of pushing to try to make sure that everybody's getting paid for the work, the time that they spend, and then we have to do new things. So that adds a challenge. But at the end of the day, we have a YouTube channel now, and we didn't have one 2 weeks ago. And we're able to share things like webinars. We started doing webinars, which we hadn't been doing, which allows us to invite people from all over the country to be in conversation with us. And then we can put an edited version of that on YouTube so that anybody can watch it. And that, I think, is kind of a neat thing. Like I said, it doesn't take away from our mission to be in person whenever we can. But I think that's a big thing. It's just the opportunities to find new ways to access people and to provide value.
Right. Tarsha, would you also like to speak a little on that? Being that your organization also is usually outdoors and involving and engaged with people, how you've been getting through, this tough time.
Still trying to figure it all out. I mean, in all honesty, this has been like, oh my goodness, has thrown me, as a business person who really isn't like a huge business mind, I should say, just learning over time. Yeah, I would say that a lot of things that Sarah is mentioning, getting online, challenging yourself to be virtual, hosting some of the content that you have in a virtual manner, trying to record things and then work with different places to see, because we do a lot with schools as well. So trying to see how we can do lessons for schools in a virtual manner. So it has been challenging. I don't really have the answers. I think we're just kind of navigating as we go in ways as well. Just being honest as a business person that these types of challenges come up, and how do you handle them? I think we kind of roll with it in ways. really going back to what's being said too, like thinking about finances. so that's been a big one too, like really digging deep into those financials and understanding, can we survive? You know, do we? So that's really something that is helping in a way on the back end of business, seeing how you survive through crisis like this. So anyway, I'll just put that out there.
Right. So Jim and Al, have you seen an increase or anything in your during this economic time? Have you seen maybe greater opportunities, more ways to reach people, or how have you been getting through this difficult time?
I guess for us, I mean, we were severely impacted by on the cheese side of things because of all the restaurants closing, and that was you know, a significant part of our business. And we are partnered with Whole Foods Markets in the Mid-Atlantic region, so that sort of helps. They have a local program, but you know, as I said earlier, we're really community based, so a lot of what we had was here. So that was a big negative for us. So what happened on the plant side with the stay-at-home type of environment we're now in, people got more interested in their gardens because they weren't leaving their homes so much. So that part of our business has really, you know, grown over the last year. So I think it's not kind of balancing things out at this point. I don't think we're in growth mode. But I think the point is, you know, we were ready to be flexible. We were ready to put the investment of time and energy into a part of our business where we felt there was an opportunity, and kind of keep the food part of the business going, but realizing that we better switch gears, and we better switch pretty quickly. And social media has been very important. E-commerce has been very important, and we were fortunate to be e-commerce enabled, but we made some improvements to that. So we made the investment there. A lot more curbside pickup, a lot more deliveries. So really, what has helped us and gotten us through this is really the plant side of the business. So you have to stay flexible. You have to be nimble. You have to be willing to change, and you have to be willing to adapt. And I think over the 20 years we've done this, we've adapted. We're adapting now. In 2008, in the financial crisis, it was the other way around. You know, people stopped doing landscaping because that was like a discretionary thing, but people had to eat. So, you know, our cheese business really took off at that point. So I think when you're thinking about a business, it's really important about diversification and really having a backup plan and contingencies. And when you have to move quickly, really try to identify the opportunities and just sort of do it.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I think
Jim,
from our standpoint, we were actually very fortunate. You know, yes, we did have a little bit of a downturn, but more in terms of exactly what was hitting Sarah and Tarsha was, you know, we have a lot of nonprofits that do tree plantings, and they couldn't get together for their large planting projects. So normally Earth Day, Arbor Day are our craziest times of the year, and they were all but silent. It was the oddest spring I've ever experienced, to be honest. But on the other hand, we did fine. We had some slight depression. We still had other things. Diversity is a key there. We're not just solely targeted with that audience. So I think what you're hearing, more importantly, from just our experience, is you're hearing from everybody about the ability to be adaptable, to be flexible. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to move quickly based on the surrounding. We used to be Octoraro wetland nursery. We grew wetland aquatic plants. That business changed. That model changed. The environment changed. And so we found that there was more opportunity in woodies, and now that's all we are, trees and shrubs. It's not that the other model doesn't exist, it still does. It just wasn't working for us where we were in the market space. But I think that's, Al hit it, and really, I think it comes down to a couple of things when you're starting your business is, what is your risk tolerance? You know, if you're a person that, you know, feels like you just always have to have that sort of comfort level underneath you, you know, entrepreneurship may not be for you. It's an ever-changing daily environment. Even when things are good, nobody saw COVID coming. So if you don't recognize in yourself that you have that ability to run and be free-flowing and go with what comes at you and think quickly and move, you know, it just might not be for you. You've got to have those traits, or you better have a darn good partner that has those traits that can keep you stable.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, Sarah, did you want to add?
Yeah, can I add one thing? I think one thing that I've had to put into gear a lot is just prioritizing too, and saying what are the things we really want to do and really can do, and what are the things that we don't need to be doing right now. I think one thing is, like, everybody on our team has a depleted energy level in a way. You know, they're just pulling in so many different directions, and it's been really important for us that we're able to say, like, we don't have to do everything right now. And maybe sometimes that's really hard to say, like, we're a helping organization, but we can't help in this way at this moment. We can do these things right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really good. So in lieu of all this, does anyone have any groundbreaking plan, something that they foresee moving forward, next steps that they see will help to carry their business forward? So let's see. Tarsha, we'll start with you on that question.
One of the biggest things that I think is really happening today is the youth. I would say there are so many youth programs that are sprouting up that are taking into consideration, like, expanding their knowledge in the environment, in the outdoors, recreation, agriculture. It's amazing to me. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, maybe we're recycling through the years, but in my years, I haven't seen it yet. So now I'm like, wow, that is so amazing. And I think that that's groundbreaking possibility for organizations such as ours, because it's never really been connected in the school systems in the same way I see that it's happening. And then also youth actually taking part in it and wanting to, and seeing the career opportunities that are possible. So I think there's so much opportunity there. And that's something that I see Let's Go Outdoors and many other organizations can take advantage of, if you will, or use that to benefit. And then also, as a business owner, like, who's going to be at the next stage of taking on the business, because, you know, we all grow old, unfortunately. So I see youth as that next possibility for building up our organization, and of course for impacting the world, environmental, outdoors, nature-based, however we see it.
Awesome. That's really great. So Al, do you want to share what future and hope you see for your business?
Well, I think that that's a tough question. And, you know, I think first and foremost, we want to be connected with our community. And it's important to stay engaged at a local level, and to sort of be together as a community and share and participate. So I think, you know, Catherine is involved in land preservation organizations. I'm involved in watershed conservation and restoration organizations. So I think we accomplish that kind of outreach because we feel like it's important to have that value. We have that value in our business to be a community-oriented business. I think at the business level, it's important to have new products or new channels, just diversify a little bit, like little tweaks, little wrinkles, just to keep people interested. You know, that's especially important on the food side of things, like cheese. People like to see new varieties. They want you to, like, we do some seasonal things now. So we're introducing some new seasonal cheeses just to keep people, hey, this looks good. How can we take advantage of that? And on the plant side, you know, I think the e-commerce has really driven our business forward, given the lack of people wanting to come to the farm. So I think we want to stay responsive to our customers. We want to be customer centric and getting back to being nimble and flexible. We're not sure how it's going to all evolve. I mean, that's really, but I think we're trying our best to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening and then trying to respond to that. I think that's generally how I feel about the future. I mean, we're optimistic, but we also want to balance business with quality of life aspects and being involved with our community and contributing.
Okay. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. Someone asked, as a follow-up to the mentor question, how do you discern if that's good or bad advice? So if anyone wants to take that question.
Well, I think you first off, it depends on the source. You know, I mean, is it Aunt Rita or Uncle Bob, or is it somebody that's got, 20 years of experience in what you're asking? So I think you have to look at the source first. And I would say don't rely on one source. I mean, you got to do your fact checking. Diversify who you're asking, I think, is as important as anything else. Because if you're just going to one person, you're only getting one point of view. It'd be the same as asking me or anybody else on this panel. This is our experiences. So I think you have to just broaden the scope.
I think also, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit business, that you have to, you can hear a lot and like invite a lot of information, but at the end of the day, it has to sit well with your own values, and you have, so that means you have to also know your values and know like what's really important to you. And then when you hear the advice, you can kind of hear like, is that something that helps me move forward with my idea, or help me figure out whether I should do this thing, or is this something that I just put in a parking lot and I consider later, or maybe it's not good advice. But there needs to be, I think, a sense of a strong core, or at least moving towards a strong core, and in knowing what you want and how you're going to get there. And I think that helps you discern what is good advice and when you should listen. I mean, always listen. Maybe it's not something you actually follow through on. I think there's a difference there. Just because someone gives you advice doesn't mean you have to do the thing, but you can still hear it.
Right. So another question from Jay. Do you always want to pursue public charity status if it fits your nonprofit?
I'm going to go on a limb and say it depends on the state and the requirements of the particular for-profit that you're doing, and that's kind of like, actually maybe I shouldn't answer this question, but generally there are guidelines about what is your status. It's not really a decision so much as like a requirement. If you're taking certain kinds of funds, you need to register a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's largely regulatorily driven. From the nonprofit side of it, that's all different categories of nonprofits, and there's pretty, established guidelines as far as, that's a choice that you have to make based on what your goals are. Does it align with this particular nonprofit status or not? So that's a choice, but it's also a defined choice.
All right. Question number 2, when just starting out, if you have funding to support yourself and your nonprofit, when do you know when to pay yourself through administration costs to run the nonprofit full-time, solely working on the business?
I think that's a Tarsha or Sarah
I'm like,
question.
oh, that's a good
Do you want to
question.
do it?
You can make that argument for nonprofit or profits. You still have to make the determination when you can afford to pay yourself. But the question was directed towards nonprofit.
I mean, I think that's a very personal question. I think you know when you know. I don't think that, I think everybody's financial circumstances are different. So I think you know when you know is basically my answer. It's like, all right, what kind of financial circumstance do I have personally, and what do I have to make happen? So, and when you start to understand, which I told you early on, when you start to understand your financials of your business, then you can really make sure you're planning ahead and understanding, you know, all the taxes and the things that are out there. So once you understand your financials really good, I think that's when you should think about paying yourself. Just my 2 cents.
I think it's also not, oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, you go ahead, son.
It's kind of not an all or nothing thing either. And I mean, I don't know when I will ever be full-time. And it may be that when we're ready to have a full-time staff that, I don't know if we will actually, but that's a, you know, kind of the way that we're setting up the organization is shared workload. So we might not be full-time, but I think that financial piece is super important, like creating a budget as detailed as possible. I mean, things like insurance, because that eats a ton of budget. All these various expenses that go into staying kind of legal, not kind of, but yeah, legal, staying, hopefully, paying for an accountant to do your taxes can be really helpful if you're a nonprofit at least. And those all add up, and knowing what those are going to be and what that looks like month to month is really good. But if you're thinking about doing a nonprofit, then you should be recording your time no matter what, and all of it, even if you're not getting paid for all of it, because then it starts counting as in-kind donation, the volunteer time. So you should really try to record all that. And then you start knowing how much time you're putting into the organization. And that helps you understand, like, how much time do I need to be putting in? There's a lot of sweat equity that goes into just setting things up. But when you start getting into the meat of your programming or whatever it is you're trying to do, then you have a sense for like what your month-to-month expenses are going to be over time. And if you can project that out for like a whole year or even beyond, it's hard to do beyond when you get started, I think. But doing a whole year, at least you know kind of where you're headed, and that will help you understand how much you can put towards salary or labor.
I was just going to add, I think, you know, the reality of a for-profit for businesses, you can be very unprofitable and nonprofit in the early years. And that goes back to that risk tolerance, is how long are you able to afford to not pay yourself? How much are you willing to reinvest in your future and the business and not pay yourself? Because those are the kind of decisions you ultimately sometimes have to make. And they're very important, you know, decisions. And you better make sure if you've got significant others that they're on board with you and stuff. It's not easy. And the only other thing I'd say too is when we were talking about projecting for the future and what the future may hold and stuff, you know, there's a lot of people that don't start their own businesses. They go out and they buy other businesses. And I think that's an important distinction. And, you know, certainly investment bankers understand that concept. But the thing is you know, if you know and you still do all your due diligence and you do all your planning and stuff like that, if you've got the resources or have access to the resources, you know, there's people that will be selling their businesses. I know that that's in our future. And, you know, I hope that we'll find one someday that wants to continue that on. But so buying a business is a whole other strategy and opportunity. You don't have to start it from scratch. And I think that that's just an important concept for people on the call.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So thank you all so much. This will conclude our time together. I really appreciate all of what you shared with us, and everyone have a good night. This will conclude our session.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, Seraiah. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.